สู่งาน Digital Law and Digital Content for Thailand 4.0 ค่ะโดยในวันนี้ค่ะเราจะมาทำความรู้จักกันนะคะกับแนวทางการนำ Creative Commons มาเป็นเครื่องมือและทางเลือกค่ะเพื่อแบ่งปันงานโดยเจ้าของลิขสิทธิ์ในยุคที่ Digital Content เป็น Product และเป็น Tool ที่มีมูลค่าค่ะโดยที่ชาวต่างชาติมีโมเดลการสร้างธุรกิจโดยการใช้ Creative Commons อย่างไรและเราจะทำอย่างไรให้ Creative Commons สร้างสรรค์สังคมในแบบ Sharing Culture อย่างยั่งยืนค่ะในครั้งนี้นะคะเราก็จะมีเครื่องแปลภาษาคอยบริการให้ทุกท่านด้วยค่ะโดยกฎหมายเลข1เป็นภาษาอังกฤษและหมายเลข2ค่ะเป็นภาษาไทยในการเสวนาครั้งนี้ค่ะสปีกเกอร์จะร่วมฟังกับเราทุกท่านด้วยนะคะหัวข้อที่น่าสนใจต่างๆมากมายกำลังจะเกิดขึ้นในอีกไม่ช้านี้ค่ะและในลำดับต่อไปนี้ค่ะดิฉันขอเรียนเชิญคุณสุรางควายุภาพผู้อำนวยการสำนักงานพัฒนาธุรกรรมทางอิเล็กทรอนิกส์องค์การมหาชนขึ้นกล่าวเปิดงานอย่างเป็นทางการด้วยค่ะ
สวัสดีค่ะเอด้าก็ลุกขึ้นมาจัดงานนี้นะคะเป็นงานที่เราคิดว่ามีความสำคัญเอด้าคือใครนะคะหลายคนก็ไม่เคยรู้จักใครไม่รู้จักเอด้าบ้างคะยกมือขึ้นมีไหมคะรู้จักกันทุกคนเป็นแฟนคลับนะคะเอด้าทำเรื่อง2เรื่องนะคะคือเรื่อง e-commerce กับเรื่องของ cyber security โปรโมทเรื่องของการขายของทางออนไลน์ก็เลยต้องมาดูความเสี่ยงด้วยว่าความเสี่ยงมีมากน้อยแค่ไหนจะต้องป้องกันมันนะคะเราก็เลยพบว่าตอนที่เราทำ e-commerce นั้นเราพบว่าจริงๆแล้วเวลาเรานึกถึง e-commerce เราจะนึกถึงสินค้าซึ่งจับต้องได้เป็นสินค้าเช่น O-top เช่นสินค้าที่เราซื้อขายกันทั่วๆไปแต่แท้ที่จริงสินค้าอีก2อย่างที่น่าสนใจมากคือเรื่องของบริการคนก็นึกว่าบริการนั้นไม่ใช่เป็นส่วนหนึ่งของ e-commerce คนก็นึกว่าเอาเข้าจริงๆแล้ว digital content หรือสินค้าที่เป็นอุตสาหกรรมเนื้อหาทั้งหลายไม่ใช่เป็นส่วนหนึ่งของ e-commerce แท้ที่จริงมันเป็นเพราะการเทรดเพลงเทรดหนังบนโลกออนไลน์นั้นเป็นสิ่งที่กำลังมาแรงนะคะแล้วก็ก่อให้เกิดผลกระทบมหาศาลตอนเอด้าลุกขึ้นมาทำ e-commerce เราก็เลยมองภาพรวมว่าคงจะมองเฉพาะสินค้าจับต้องได้คงไม่ได้คงต้องมองไปถึงบริการมองไปถึงอุตสาหกรรมดิจิทัลคอนเทนต์ด้วยถามว่าทำไมต้องมองไปถึงอุตสาหกรรมดิจิทัลคอนเทนต์ด้วยเหตุผลว่าเรามองว่าคนไทยนั้นมี innovation มี creative mind เพราะฉะนั้นสิ่งนี้คือสิ่งซึ่งมันอยู่ในนี้ของเราทำไมเราจะไม่หาวิธีการที่จะดูแลมันอย่างถูกวิธีแล้วก็เพราะว่าสังคมไทยเป็นส่วนหนึ่งของสังคมเหมือนกับหลายๆประเทศนะคะที่เราคิดว่าสิ่งที่โพสต์หรือสิ่งที่อัปโหลดไว้บนโลกอินเทอร์เน็ตนั้นฟรีเสมอแล้วก็ดาวน์โหลดกันแชร์กันโดยที่อาจจะไม่ได้เข้าใจถึงบทบาทของความเป็นเจ้าของผู้สร้างสรรค์งานว่าเขาจะดูแลมันอย่างไรเขาจะหวงแหนมันอย่างไรก็กลายเป็นว่าเราอาจจะละเมิดโดยที่รู้เท่าไม่ถึงการก็เป็นไปได้นะคะถามว่าเครื่องมือเครื่องไม้สำคัญที่ช่วยในเรื่องนี้มีหรือเปล่ามีก็ยกตัวอย่างเช่น Creative Commons Creative Commons คืออะไรหรือวันนี้เอด้าก็เลยลุกขึ้นจัดเรื่องนี้ทำไมเอด้าถึงลุกขึ้นมาทำเรื่องนี้ดูเหมือนเป็นดูหลายท่านอาจจะบอกว่าดูไกลตัวนะคะด้วยเหตุผลว่าก็คุณลุกขึ้นมาโปรโมท e-commerce แล้วทำไมต้องลุกขึ้นมาทำอะไรที่เกี่ยวกับเรื่องกฎระเบียบหรือเรื่องของ Creative Commons นี่เป็นตัวอย่างเราถือว่าเรื่องกฎระเบียบถือเป็น soft law ชนิดหนึ่งกติกาที่เป็นการพัฒนาขึ้นมาและในลักษณะไกด์ไลน์หรือ best practice นั้นถือเป็น soft law ที่สำคัญที่เราจะอยู่ในโลกอินเทอร์เน็ตโลก 4.0 ที่กำลังจะไป 5.0 ได้เป็นอย่างดีการแชร์ริ่งบางเรื่องเป็นสิ่งซึ่งควรทำอย่างยิ่งนะคะเพราะฉะนั้นก็เลยเป็นเหตุผลที่เอด้าสนใจในเรื่องเหล่านี้แล้วเราก็พบอีกอันหนึ่งตอนที่เราไปคบหาสมาคมกับอุตสาหกรรมดิจิทัลคอนเทนต์เราก็พบว่าการแก้ไขไปที่รากฐานของปัญหาไม่ได้มีเช่นเราทำหนังขึ้นมาสักเรื่องหนึ่งเราก็ขายไปทั้งหนังเลยนะคะทั้งเรื่องเลยโดยที่เราไม่ได้คิดว่ามูลค่าของมันที่จะเป็นมูลค่าต่อยอดมันเนี่ยเราจะดูแลมันยังไงในเชิงของทรัพย์สินทางปัญญายิ่งไปกว่านั้นเนี่ยเราก็พบว่าคนไทยซึ่งวันนี้นั้นเข้าสู่ยุคที่เป็นเรียกว่าเรา generate content เองละเราจะดูแลมันยังไงเราจะรู้จักวิธีการใช้ประโยชน์จากมันได้อย่างไรการแชร์เรื่องของ copyright เป็นสิ่งที่สำคัญมากนะคะก็เลยเป็นเหตุผลที่เอด้าก็เลยลุกขึ้นมาทำเรื่องนี้แล้วเราก็เลยลงไปสำรวจตัวเลข นะคะ e-commerce วันนี้ของเราคาดการณ์ว่าปีนี้จะมีตัวเลขอยู่ที่ 2.5 ล้านโตกว่า 10% ทุกปีเลยที่น่าสนใจคือเราร่วมกับไปซัพพอร์ตสมาพันธ์ภาพยนตร์ร่วมกับกระทรวงวัฒนธรรมเพื่อให้มีตัวเลขของอุตสาหกรรมดิจิทัลคอนเทนต์ว่าบ้านเราเท่าไหร่เพราะแต่เดิมที่ผ่านมาเราไม่มีตัวเลขวันนี้ตัวเลขอยู่ที่ประมาณ190,000 ล้านน่าสนใจทีเดียวนะคะว่ามันจะโตไปกว่านี้ได้หรือเปล่าเพราะฉะนั้นการลงไปดูรากฐานของปัญหาในเชิงของการดูแลทรัพย์สินทางปัญญาเชิงรุกไม่ใช่เอาแต่ปกป้องแล้วก็พูดแต่เรื่องละเมิดโดยที่ไม่ได้เข้าใจว่ากลไกกติกาในเรื่องของการแชร์ที่เป็น Public Sharing ของตัว Copyright นั้นมันเป็นสิ่งที่น่าสนใจสามารถหารายได้ได้ด้วยซ้ำนะคะก็เลยเป็นที่มาที่เอด้าลุกขึ้นจัดงานวันนี้ร่วมกับStakeholder ที่สำคัญรวมทั้งเชิญทาง Creative Commons มาโดยตรงซึ่งถือเป็นโอกาสดีของประเทศไทยแล้วเราก็มีแผนด้วยกันนะคะว่าในอนาคตเราก็คงจะเป็นพาร์ทเนอร์หลักสำหรับเป็นตัวแทนของประเทศที่จะเข้าไปดูแลเรื่องนี้ด้วยกันในวันพรุ่งนี้ยังมีอีกงานหนึ่งนะคะเราเชิญอาจารย์จากมหาวิทยาลัยฮาร์วาร์ดมาพูดถึงเรื่องดิจิทัลลอว์ในหลายมิติด้วยกันซึ่งน่าสนใจน่าติดตามนะคะดิฉันเองก็หวังว่าการจัดสัมมนาครั้งนี้คงจะก่อให้เกิดประโยชน์กับพวกเราทุกคนไม่มากก็น้อยนะคะแล้วก็คิดว่าภารกิจใดๆก็ตามหรืองานใดๆก็ตามหรือหัวข้อใดๆก็ตามที่เป็นประโยชน์และพวกเราคิดว่าถ้าเรากำลังเข้าสู่ยุคที่เป็น disruptive technology ภาวะปั่นป่วนของเทคโนโลยีที่ทำให้เกิดการเปลี่ยนแปลงกับชีวิตของเราซึ่งเราต้องเตรียมตัวตั้งแต่เนิ่นๆพวกเราคงจะรู้สึกตื่นเต้นตกใจไปพร้อมๆกับดิฉันเหมือนกันนะคะว่าตัวเทคโนโลยีที่มัน disrupt เนี่ยมันกำลังทำให้ชีวิตเราเปลี่ยนเราจะเตรียมรับมือกับมันอย่างไรนะคะดิฉันก็ฝากเอ็ดด้าเอาไว้ในมือพวกเราทุกคนด้วยนะคะช่วยกันสปอร์ตภารกิจเอ็ดด้าด้วยนะคะขอบพระคุณค่ะ
ขอขอบคุณนะคะคุณสุรังคณาข่าววายุภาพนะคะเดี๋ยวยังเรียนเชิญอยู่กับเราบนเวทีสักครู่หนึ่งนะคะและในลำดับถัดไปนะคะขอเรียนเชิญ Mrs. Jane Park Director of Platform and Platform Partnership Creative Commons.org to be on the stageในลำดับนี้นะคะทั้งสองคนก็จะถ่ายภาพร่วมกันค่ะก็มีการมอบของที่ระลึกด้วยนะคะค่ะและในลำดับถัดไปนะคะดิฉันขอเรียนเชิญอาจารย์ไพบูลย์อมรพิมโยเกียรติค่ะกรรมการผู้จัดการบริษัทที่ปรึกษากฎหมายไพบูลย์จำกัดและผู้เชี่ยวชาญกฎหมายผ่าน IT และ IP ได้เลยค่ะรวมไปถึงค่ะคุณพลอยเจริญสมนะคะจากเอ็ดด้าค่ะและคุณสุภจิตราเลาหาวัฒนาพิมโยจากเอ็ดด้าเช่นเดียวกันค่ะเชิญเวทีเลยนะคะถ่ายภาพร่วมกันเป็นที่ระลึกเลยค่ะ Jane Park Director of Platforms and Partnership Creative Commons.org ก็ขอขอบคุณ Mrs. Jane Park ด้วยนะคะและทุกท่านเลยนะคะที่มาถ่ายภาพร่วมกันและทำให้งานนี้เกิดขึ้นในวันนี้นะคะและตอนนี้ค่ะเดี๋ยวMrs. Jane Park นะคะก็จะมาร่วมพูดคุยกับเรานะคะแล้วก็พูดถึงหัวข้อต่างๆในวันนี้ด้วยค่ะสำหรับหัวข้อการบรรยายในวันนี้นะคะก็จะเป็นหัวข้อ Creative Commons and Potential Application of Creative Commons for Thailand โดย Mrs. Jane Park Director of Platform and Partnership Creative Commons.org ขอเรียนเชิญรับฟังได้เลยค่ะ
Okay, so Swatika, good morning everyone. I am so pleased and honored to be here as a guest of ETDA and of the Thailand people. I am Jane Park. I am the Director of Platforms and Partnerships at Creative Commons. I think this is my first slide. So I came from California in the United States, a very long way to talk to you about Creative Commons. Before I begin, I am very curious about those of you in the room. how many of you have ever heard of Creative Commons in any capacity? Could you please raise your hand so I have an idea? Okay, so that's actually a very good number. That's about a third of you, maybe a fourth of you in the room. So I'm glad to be here to talk to you about Creative Commons. I'm going to be talking about Creative Commons from the very beginning, from start to finish. I'll give you the background of Creative Commons and how it started and how it has evolved since 2001 when we founded the organization to today in 2017. This slide has my email and also my Twitter handle. If you have questions during the presentation that you want to tweet at me, go ahead and follow me at Jane Daly and tweet at me, and I will get to your questions following the presentation. If you have questions a month from now and you want to ask a burning question about copyright or Creative Commons, go ahead and email me at janepark@creativecommons.org. So to get started, I'm going to be splitting this presentation up into 3 different sections. It's going to be a lot of information, so I will go slowly and I will repeat myself, and I will pause at the end of each section for question and answer. I have my translator device up here, so I will be able to get your questions. I do ask that you limit your questions to the section that I just presented on, because your questions about the future of Creative Commons may be answered in a future section. So the basic 3 sections that I'll be going over is the overview of Creative Commons, the history of how we started, and how Creative Commons is built on and interacts with copyright law. So in the United States, copyright law is very restrictive. I heard that in Thailand it is the same way, but that also in Thailand the average person may not know that much about copyright law. This is the same thing in the United States. If you ask the average person walking down the street about copyright, they won't be able to tell you very much, but they can tell you that it's restrictive and that companies will sue over copyright and that it's very confusing for them. So I think we're both coming from the same place when it comes to copyright. The second section, I will go over Creative Commons licenses and how they work in detail and how they are working in the world on internet platforms like YouTube and Wikipedia and Flickr. And then I will also talk about how Creative Commons as a concept has evolved from just copyright licenses when we first started the organization to a set of values and beliefs that have pretty much influenced the world as we know it today. And then last but not least, I want to give you an opportunity to tell me what sectors you work in and how you might see Creative Commons apply in your work in Thailand. So I'm going to go over the opportunities for Thailand, talk about the new Creative Commons chapter that may be starting in Thailand, hosted by ETDA, and how you all can join and become members in your individual capacity or in your capacity as your organizational representative. So that's a lot of information, and I'll go through it step by step. So first, to start, what is Creative Commons, and how does it even work with copyright? So Creative Commons today is three things. We started off as a set of copyright licenses to grant further copyright permissions on the web, but today we are a nonprofit organization. I work for this NGO. It is headquartered in California in the United States. But on top of that, we are a global network of people representing organizations from 85 jurisdictions around the world. And just to give you an idea of how large we are, at this year's Global Summit in Toronto in April, we had 400 representatives from 85 countries attend. And then last but not least, Creative Commons since 2001 has evolved into a global movement towards openness. So we don't just have this global network of people who are copyright experts. They are actually advocating for open policies in governments. They are furthering access to research. They are advocating for net neutrality, and they are advocating for copyright reform in 85 countries around the world. So this is how much Creative Commons has grown in 16 years since we were founded. But we all started with a set of copyright licenses, and that's where I would like to begin the story. So we began as a response to an outdated copyright system. Copyright, if you're not familiar with it, has just been growing increasingly restrictive over time. And so Creative Commons was founded as a release valve to that copyright law system, to provide relief for those who wanted to work in the more flexible conditions that the internet provided and that digital technologies enabled. Creative Commons at its base was founded as a simple standardized system and a legally robust way to grant copyright permissions to creative works online. Before we founded Creative Commons, there was no globally standard way to do this. There was only on one end of the spectrum all rights reserved copyright, which meant you always had to ask permission to use anything or you would get sued. And at the other end there was public domain, which is free for all, but didn't serve necessarily the creator's needs or respect their rights. Over time, since we founded Creative Commons, I mentioned the role and value of Creative Commons has expanded. But first, I want to highlight the tension that has been growing since 1976. In the United States in 1976, that was the first time that copyright law drastically changed to become more restrictive. Before 1976, copyright was a limited term that you had to renew every 14 years. You had to register your copyright, go to the Copyright Office and say, I would like to renew my copyright in this work. Otherwise, the copyright would expire and that work would fall into the public domain and you could do whatever you want with it. But in 1976, they extended the term of copyright to life of the author plus 50 years after the author's death, and the corporate works were 120 years. So ever since 1976, the copyright law has becoming more restrictive and it's become automatic. But at the same time, if you realize in the 70s, that's when the internet also started taking off. And then by the 90s and the 2000s, that's when the internet was ubiquitous for everybody, even the average person to share. And so the internet, at the same time that copyright law is getting more restrictive, the internet is making it easier than ever to share, to digitally distribute, and pretty much there's no limit to how much you can share on the internet. And copying is kind of running into copyright law. There's a huge tension there, and that's where Creative Commons was founded, to relieve that tension. So the original founders of Creative Commons back in 2001 saw Creative Commons as a some rights reserved approach to copyright. Whereas copyrights was all rights reserved, you had to ask explicit permission. Creative Commons was a way to say, I want to keep my copyright, but I want to grant certain permissions because the internet and digital technologies has enabled me to share in these ways, but I still want to maintain my copyright. So it was a middle ground between all rights reserved copyright and public domain. It was a way to make copyright relevant for the digital age. And it is also, one way we frame it is it's saving the world from failed sharing because it's addressing the potential of the internet and everything that you can do with it. So as a next step, I'd like to show this video. This video was was produced by Jesse Dillon, the son of Bob Dylan. He did this for free because he was such a big fan of Creative Commons and the digital technologies that it enabled. And, oops, we're going backwards. And it's available for free online under Creative Commons license. And it shows our founders talking about the importance of a shared culture in Creative Commons and why they founded it. So if we can show the video, please.
What does it mean to be growing if we don't have a shared culture? And what does a shared culture mean to share? It's only in the last 100 or 150 years or so that we've started tightly restricting how that culture gets used. The internet enabled an infrastructure where anybody can participate without asking permission. We have all these new technologies that allow people to express themselves, take control of their own creative impulses, but the laws get in the way. Creative Commons is designed to save the world from failed sharing. People who actually want to share stuff, who put it up in the web because they want to share it on certain terms. So we wanted to create a simple way for creators to say to the world, here's the freedom that I want to run with my creative work. Here are the things you're allowed to do. Can I reproduce it? Can I copy it? Can I put it in my textbook? Can I use that photograph? Can I make a new version of it?
Creative Commons gives tools to creators to make a choice about copyright.
Creative Commons license can cover anything that copyright covers. Every license says, you need to give me attribution. I created this, give me credit for the work I did. The basic choices are commercial use or not. Can you make derivative works, versions, adaptations, or not? And do you want me to have to share alike? So if I take your stuff, do I have to offer it to the next person under the same terms? There's no requirement for you to do anything with your work other than what you do. You own the copyright. What we've done is given you the right to exercise your copyright in more ways and more simply. So the idea here is to enable the creative impulses that the technology turns loose and get the law out of the way. The work of Creative Commons is really about laying the infrastructure, groundwork for this new type of culture, a new kind of folk culture. Somebody from Delhi, somebody from New York, somebody from Singapore can feel comfortable using a photo that was created and given away by someone in the United States or in China or wherever that the licenses have been extended to, with their identity being preserved, which means that people can actually create new kinds of things, come together and build things.
Mashups that people can do with people's Flickr photos.
And CC Mixer has allowed artists to make music together. It's really about creativity and connection.
Access and control.
From amateurs who simply feel the love of what they're doing and they want to share it and they want other people to be able to make use of it, to commercial organizations.
In the end, this will have a very successful place in the for-profit economy.
Creative Commons is this bridge to this future. Is you got to move away from thinking about content, thinking about communities. Communities that develop around content, and the sharing that the licenses allow enable these communities to come together.
A physical commons is like a park where anybody can enter equally. A commons with intellectual works is actually much freer.
It really is going to be the pillar for communication between people, cultural exchange.
A space for more speech, more free expression.
And that's the kind of commons we're trying to create.
So all the images that you see in the music were also Creative Commons licensed, which means they were free online, and we combined them to create this video. And that video featured our past CEOs, Joey Ito, Lawrence Lessig, one of our founders, and all of our board members in the past. So it's a great video. We like to show it just to give you an idea of what is possible. So this was in 2001. Those people that you saw in the video, they were legal experts at Harvard and Stanford, at different universities in the United States, and they decided to start Creative Commons because in the beginning, Lawrence Lessig wanted to reform copyright so that it was less restrictive. He went to the US Supreme Court and he lost. And because he lost the case to reform copyright, they decided, well, what can we do instead? Can we create an alternate world where there is legal sharing on the internet? And that's how they came up with the idea for Creative Commons. So thanks to Creative Commons, 16 years later, after 2001, a legal universe of sharing does exist. In our latest State of the Commons report, which we just issued earlier this year, and we launched it at our global summit in April, we counted at least 1.2 billion works online that are being shared legally and freely under Creative Commons licenses or our public domain tools. And this digital commons spans everything from scientific data to educational resources to academic research to music to films to the video, the video I showed you, lots more videos like that, cultural heritage, museums, artifacts, anything that is copyrightable, it can also be Creative Commons licensed. The one exception is software. Open source software has an entire other world behind it, and we recommend using those licenses for software. But if we were to add software to this number, you can see it would probably be double this number. And you can see the growth that we've charted over the years. Now that we count every year, we probably have grown about 100 million works each year. So again, Creative Commons was founded to help realize the full potential of the internet because copyright law as an outdated system was not addressing the capabilities of the internet and digital technologies. And in terms of how the younger generation is sharing today, a lot of them don't even think about copyright. So Creative Commons is a way for them to share legally and adhere to the system while also leveraging digital technologies for innovation. So again, Creative Commons today is a set of legal tools. In addition to our 6 Creative Commons licenses, we also offer 2 public domain tools, which I will go over in detail in a bit. And the licenses have become a global standard for licensing. There is no other organization that is working with 85 chapters around the world to make sure those licenses align to local and international copyright law. And we are a global network of people moving towards openness. And then we are a nonprofit organization supporting all of the above. So this is a graphic that kind of maps our licenses. In between all rights reserved, copyright, and the public domain, like I mentioned, we are the relief space in between, and we offer more flexible permissions for creators and institutions and companies who want to share under more flexible copyright conditions while maintaining their copyright. That is one misconception. Sometimes people think that Creative Commons is all free and there's no copyright. That could be further from the truth. Creative Commons could not exist without copyright. We are built on copyright law. If there was no copyright, Creative Commons would not exist as well. This is a book that we just published earlier this year called Made with Creative Commons. It was funded by a Kickstarter project, and it originally started as an investigation into how Creative Commons was being incorporated into business models and how businesses were using Creative Commons. The interesting thing was that after a year of researching and writing this book, we found out that rather than businesses leveraging Creative Commons for their own profits, Creative Commons values were infecting how they were running their business. So we were becoming a big influence in how businesses were perceiving their position in the world as a sort of social organization and how they should give to the world. And also they were thinking about different ways to adapt to the economy. For example, giving everything content away for free, but building value-added services around that content. I will be going over a couple of these examples later in the talk. But you can access this book for free online. I can give you the URL after the talk as well. It's under a Creative Commons license. It's been translated, I think, into a few languages, and we hope that it will be translated into Thai as well. So I mentioned that Creative Commons is a network and a movement. We're in 85 countries around the world. We hope to restart our chapter in Thailand. Thailand actually started with us 10 years ago, but since then, sort of activity has dropped off, and we hope to restart it with ETDA. In addition to us being a global network, our global network itself is only one in many global networks. So we work with partner organizations at the Mozilla Foundation, at Google, at Wikimedia Foundation, at Electronic Frontier Foundation. All these other organizations and networks that are moving towards openness, we work with them in concert in order to advocate for copyright reform around the world and many other issues such as net neutrality, access to research, and so on. This is a slide that shows some of the flags from the different 85 countries. I actually have to update this because I think we have many more countries that have added since we created this slide. And then this is, in the last State of the Commons, we reported at least 34 languages that Creative Commons licenses are being used in for various works across different domains. This is an example of the global movement towards openness that I was talking about. So Wired is a big publishing giant in the United States that covers the Silicon Valley and technology and how it evolves over time. One op-ed recently written was about how paying to read the research that you pay for as a taxpayer is ridiculous, and we believe the same is true. So one very simple argument that has worked with governments around the world and academic institutions is that if taxpayer dollars are going towards research, we are paying for them out of our pocket, then that research should be publicly available back to the public. It seems a no-brainer argument, and it seems to have resonated with people around the world. The last we checked, last week we read a research article that said that 50% of all research articles you can read online now are open access under Creative Commons, and we hope to increase that number. So I mentioned that Creative Commons is an organization as well. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. That will not mean very much to you, but basically we're an NGO and we're headquartered in the United States and no government controls us. We are very small, so at any given moment in time we're less than 20 full-time staff. I'm one of those staff. We run various programs at the organization in addition to supporting the global network, which would be CC Thailand and those 85 countries. We also run programs to advocate for openness in different fields. So we have a very strong open education program that works to make education free and universally accessible. We have a very strong policy program that works to further open policies in government at the federal, state, and local levels. We have a user-generated content program, which is a program that I lead. So this has to do with content and media online, whether it's Vimeo, Flickr, YouTube, Wikipedia, wherever you go and you are uploading content or finding free content or finding commercial content, I work with those platforms to make sure that Creative Commons is an option in those platforms. And then of course we have technology. We have Creative Commons Search. We have several versions of our Creative Commons search engine where you can go and find the 1.2 billion works. We are in the middle of revamping and revitalizing our search so that it will search more of the web than ever before, and that's led by our technology director. And then last but not least, we have our legal program, which is led by our general counsel. We started off as a legal organization to develop the copyright licenses. Since then, we've moved beyond the licenses to be applicable in all these fields, but we are at core still a very robust legal infrastructure for the rest of the world when it comes to copyright licensing. So here's a photo of, it was actually 1 year ago in Berlin. This is when our staff met with our global regional coordinators, and we decided to take a picture and just share it in presentations. Our CEO is Ryan Markley. He's one from the right, next to Diane Peters, our general counsel. So now I'm going to go into detail about Creative Commons and how it interacts with copyright, because I know that most people don't have a very good grasp of copyright. So I'm going to go over some copyright basics of how it functions in the world and in the U.S. Basically, the similarities that we see between Thailand and the U.S. government and Berne Convention laws. So I mentioned at the beginning of this talk that even though there may be copyright differences between Thailand and the U.S., at base, there's a lot of similarities. Copyright is confusing to most people, to most average people, and anywhere around the world, you ask them about copyright, they'll say, oh, we know it exists and it kind of protects stuff and we can get sued if we misuse something, but that they couldn't really tell you more than that. And that's because copyright law itself is very confusing, and even copyright lawyers find it confusing. So everyone is in the same boat when it comes to copyright law. So some basic features of copyright that are applicable to most regions in the world is that it grants exclusive rights to creators, which means that if you are a copyright owner of a work that you created, only you have the right to grant permissions to copy that work, to distribute that work, to publicly perform that work. And that's true pretty much most places in the world. It does not protect facts or ideas. So for example, the fact that my grandfather is 100 years old, that is a fact. It cannot be copyrighted because it is a well-known fact. Another thing is a general idea cannot be copyrighted. You can have the greatest idea for a scientific invention, but if you don't put that down on paper and copyright it, it is not actually copyrightable. You have to set it in a tangible medium, either writing it down on paper, writing it in an email, or so on. Copyright today is granted automatically at the moment of creation. So not many people know this, that even when you're writing an email, you don't even have to publish or send it. Basically, when you're finished writing that email, you own the copyright over that email, and you own exclusive rights to that email. And last but not least, copyright lasts a very, very, very long time. I mentioned before, in the United States, it's life of the author plus 70 years, 120 years for corporate works. I'm not sure what the length is in Thailand, but I do know that internationally, the baseline is life of the author plus 50 years. So no matter where you go, copyright's going to last a very long time. So here is sort of a chart that illustrates the point I was making earlier about over time since 1976, copyright law has been getting increasingly more restrictive, while the internet has made sharing increasingly easier. So you see this tension between the two progressing. And at some point in between, in 2001, Creative Commons is founded to be a release valve for 1.2 billion works that are now free online. So the purpose of copyright, there are generally two approaches for most copyright systems around the world. The first approach is incentivizing authors' creativity. It's really the point of that approach is to promote innovation in the economy and incentivize creation of new works by other authors. And that is an approach that the United States has taken. That is at the core of our philosophy and our law. But the second approach is also, there are elements of that in the United States copyright system as well. And basically, most copyright systems around the world have both of these elements in more or less degree. The second approach is about preserving authorial oversight and the attribution to the author and integrity of the original work. That exists as well in the United States copyright law system, even though it is a secondary focus. In France, for example, that secondary focus is actually its primary focus. So these are the two general approaches towards copyright law in the world. I'm curious to know at the end of the session, what is the approach in Thailand? So this is actually a piece of language from the copyright law system in the United States. As you can see, our first purpose is really to incentivize authors' creativity and innovation. It's to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. So that was the original intent of copyright law in the United States. Obviously, we've fallen away from that. We've kind of gotten more restrictive because the limited time is life of the author plus 70 years. So it's very different from when it was a limited 14-year period. These are the rights that copyright covers as an exclusive right. So if you own the copyright to a work, let's say that video we just saw earlier, only you have the right to copy and distribute it. Only you have the right to publicly perform that script. Only you have the right to publicly display it like we just did. And only you have the right to build upon it, which means translate it, remix it, combine it with other videos and film. And only you have the right to digitally distribute it. Anyone who wants to do those things with your work would have to ask your permission explicitly. So some global aspects of copyright, I touched upon them. With the Berne Convention, there are some baselines that all of the countries that have signed on to with the Berne Convention have agreed to. One is that copyright is automatic in the instant of creation. Another is a baseline that the term of copyright is life of the author plus 50 years. Some countries can do more restrictive terms, such as the United States. And then the last sort of baseline is that any copyright law that I respect for my own country's works, I must provide the same deference to other countries' works. So that kind of quid pro quo. But of course, those are the only really commonalities with copyright. When it comes to different regions like Australia and United States, there are a lot of local variations. So when it comes to exceptions and limitations to copyright, for example, in the United States we have something called fair use, which means you can still use a copyrighted work and you don't even have to get a license or pay to use it if it's for the purposes of parody or criticism. So for example, Saturday Night Live, that is all parody, that is all criticism. They can use copyrighted works for free because it falls under fair use. In Australia, they have something similar called fair dealing, but their fair dealing laws are more restrictive and not necessarily aligned with ours. And another local variation is the public domain. So the public domain means that you can do anything with a work. It has fallen into the public domain. There is no copyright on it. When a work falls into the public domain varies around the world, and what the public domain means varies around the world. And so, as you can see, there's lots of local variations, and that's why it was so important for Creative Commons to be founded, because it was really the first global standard when it came to copyright and how it was applied around the world. Creative Commons is basically the global standard for free flow of information, and one primary example of that is a Wikipedia project. Wikipedia, as you all know, is a global encyclopedia. Anyone can contribute to it. It's essentially all under Creative Commons. It's under the copyleft Creative Commons license, which is attribution share alike. It means that if you adapt or translate any work on Wikipedia or you contribute to it, it must be shared freely with the global community. So it has the same rules regardless of what country you're in. And it's also governed in a very open, democratic way, where the community rules that govern how you function on Wikipedia as a Wikipedia user is the same across jurisdictions. So I'm going to pause there, because I know I went over a lot of information about copyright and CC licenses, to see if there are one or two questions about copyright basics and how Creative Commons licenses interact with them. Are there any questions? If not, I can go on, and we can do a longer Q&A at the end, because I'll be providing more context. Okay, I'll just go on. So now I'm going to talk about Creative Commons licenses and how they actually work in detail, moving on from copyright. And then I'm going to talk about the different examples of Creative Commons being applied to different internet platforms, and how Creative Commons as a value system has actually evolved over time since we founded it in 2001. And it's being used in all sorts of ways in emerging industries like 3D printing that didn't actually exist in 2001 when we founded the licenses. So at base, Creative Commons licenses enable copyright holders to grant copyright permissions to their works. And there are 6 licenses. Some of them grant commercial uses, some of them reserve commercial uses, some of them grant derivative uses, which means that you can make an adaptation or a translation or a remix of a work, and some of them reserve those rights. But all of the things, all of the licenses have in common is one base condition, and that's attribution. If you Creative Commons license your work, you're saying you have to give me credit as an author, no matter what you do with my work. And that's the base Creative Commons license. So there are 4 different conditions in Creative Commons. There's attribution, which I said is the base condition, and on top of that you can add more restrictions if you choose. And mix and match to be really legally 6 different copyright licenses, because that's how you can legally mix and match them. The first one below attribution is share alike. Share alike is basically the copyleft version for Creative Commons licenses. You may have heard of copyleft in open source software. It basically says if you take my work and you remix it, if you make a translation, if you make a derivative, you have to share your work back freely under the same exact terms. So it ensures that the commons of digital creativity continues to grow and it's not being exploited for other means. And that is the attribution share alike license is a license that all of Wikipedia is under, and that's why Wikipedia remains free and why Wikipedia continues to grow. The third condition is non-commercial. That's pretty straightforward. You can say, I reserve commercial rights. I don't want you to make a commercial use of this unless you ask for my permission. And so you can add that if you like. Some people don't like to add that because when it comes to educational resources, for example, that are funded by the government through taxpayer dollars, it makes sense for those resources to be available to everyone equally. And then the last condition is the no derivative works condition. That is a condition that says you can't translate my work, you can't adapt it, you can't change it significantly unless you ask my permission first. And you can add that if you are worried about any remixes that you might not want to happen. So those 4 conditions are remixed into those 6 different licenses. The unique part of our licenses is that we are designed specifically for the internet age. So even in 2001, that was 16 years ago, but we've still held up in terms of our 3-layer design. So our licenses have 3 layers to them. There is a lawyer-readable code, which is the actual legal license that lawyers from around the world have drafted and vetted together. There is the human-readable deed, which we call the summary of the license so that average, normal people can understand that are not lawyers. And then there is the actual machine-readable version, and that's for search engines, computer programs, software, applications, to be able to communicate to you, the end user, that this work is under a Creative Commons license. That's what makes Creative Commons works countable and discoverable and be able to be analyzed on the internet. So every single license that we have has this 3-layer design. So to give you an example, this is a lawyer-readable code for the most open license that we have, which is the Creative Commons Attribution License. You can see it's very long. This is actually very legally robust. This is the latest version of our licenses 4.0, which we launched in 2013. And it was designed to be internationally applicable. It didn't even have to be ported to different jurisdictions. Right now it is being translated into more than a dozen languages, and we hope that one day it will be translated into the Thai language. And here is the human-readable version. You can see it's much shorter. It's a summary. There's some iconography. It simply tells the average user that would stumble upon Flickr or Wikipedia what you can and can't do with the work. And if you are curious and you want to read the legal code, it is linked further in this seed. And this is the machine-readable metadata, what we call the CC-REL language that we developed more than 10 years ago. It's still applicable to this day, which is amazing considering how much technology has changed. It's basically a small snippet of HTML that you can copy and paste. And this is what makes Creative Commons licensed works really viable for the internet age and really discoverable. When you go to Creative Commons Search or Google Advanced Search and you look for Creative Commons licensed content, this is what makes it possible for your search results to come back with 1.2 billion results. So now I'm going to go into how the different public domain tools work, because in addition to our 6 Creative Commons licenses, we offer 2 public domain tools. The first one is CC0. It's basically a dedication or a waiver, because it's a proactive way to say, I relinquish all of my copyrights in a work. So this is not actually a license, this is a waiver. You're saying, I don't want copyright in this work, I want to relinquish all my copyrights. It is actually a legal tool. There's a legal text behind it, because it's been aligned to international copyright law. Before CC0, there was actually no way to say my work is in the public domain and be legally viable, which is kind of crazy, and that's why we developed this tool. You also might be wondering, why would anyone give up all of their copyrights? Well, there's a variety of reasons. Some people really do want to give up their copyrights because they believe in free access to information. Some are institutions that develop scientific data and databases, and because the rights around databases are so confusing from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, they just want to remove all doubt and say, hey, you can use this data for free because it's data, and it's not necessarily something that has a creative element. So that's Creative Commons 0. And then the second public domain tool we offer is the public domain mark. So this is not an actual legal tool. This is just a label. It's a standard label that we developed because it became evident years ago that there was no way for a museum, for example, to mark works that were already in the public domain. So for example, a Van Gogh painting, the digital representation of that is in the public domain because it was created way before copyright existed, or its copyright expired, even if the copyright did exist. But museums had no way of indicating that this is in the public domain and you can do whatever you want with it. So we developed the public domain mark. It's basically a label that you can attach to a work that is already in the public domain. We do not recommend this tool to be used by an individual. This is only for institutions or libraries that have the resources to research the public domain status of a work. So these are all of our tools, our licenses and public domain tools mapped from the most open at the top to the most closed at the bottom. So you can see that public domain is at the top and then Creative Commons attribution. As you keep adding more license limitations and conditions, we get more restrictive. So the most restrictive license is the attribution, non-commercial, no derivative works condition. And of course the most restrictive of all is just default, all rights reserved copyright. So now I'm going to go on to actually how to apply these licenses. If you're curious about applying Creative Commons to your own work, whether they are photos or a text, I'm going to walk you through how you can do that and where you can do that. So the first step is choosing the Creative Commons license that is right for you or your organization or your company. Because we offer a menu of options, you have a lot to choose from. So you want to familiarize yourself with the different licenses. But it can be kind of difficult to do that. So people have developed in our community different guides that walk you through the steps of what you want to do with your work. You really want to align your intentions of how you want to share your work online with the license that is right for you. So this is one example of one of those guides that our community has developed. On our own website, we have a chooser. If you go to creativecommons.org/choose, you can play around with the chooser there, which asks you just a few basic questions, such as, do you want to reserve commercial rights? Do you want to allow derivatives of your work, etc.? And you'll get the license that you want. And then it'll spit out a machine-readable HTML code. You can copy and paste that into your website if you are licensing the work on your own website and sharing it, or your own organization's website. But we also work with platforms, as I mentioned. So we work with content platforms like Flickr so that you don't have to come to our website and copy and paste or do anything complicated. You can just go directly to the content platform of your choice if it has Creative Commons, which many now do, such as Flickr. This is an example. And within Flickr, when you're uploading the photo, you can choose which license you want to apply to that photo. So Flickr launched with us years ago. They have Creative Commons licensing baked in for batch licensing of all of your works, for individual licensing of your photos, and so on. And they also have a search on their own platform where you can search Creative Commons licensed images to use for free in Flickr. So this is our search prototype that we just launched earlier this year with the Met Museum and Europeana and some other partners. This search is a prototype. It only searches 5 platforms right now, but this is a prototype for our future search, which will search across the web. And we're currently building that as we speak. If you still want to search more than 5 platforms, we have an old search that searches across maybe 15 platforms, including using Google Advanced Search. So not many people know this, but if you go to Advanced Search Filters in Google, you can actually look for Creative Commons content. You can filter by different usage rights, and that actually spits out Creative Commons content. If you need a cute cat photo, for example, for your presentation, that's where you go. So now I'm going to go over some additional examples of Creative Commons on content platforms. I mentioned a few of them just now, but I am working, so these are the content platforms following that we've worked with in all different domains, including scientific data, music, journalism, and media, and we've worked to integrate Creative Commons licenses into these platforms. So Flickr I just mentioned. 500px, which is the center logo, is also a photo licensing platform, and they have Creative Commons licenses enabled. Wikimedia Commons is a digital repository for all of the images on Wikipedia. Everything on Wikimedia Commons is either under a Creative Commons license or in the public domain. SpaceX is Elon Musk's. You know Elon Musk, the founder of Tesla. SpaceX is one of his ventures. They actually decided to one-up NASA and say, hey, we're going to release our images from space into the public domain using CC0 because we believe space belongs to everybody. Europeana is a digital library for all of Europe, which aggregates pretty much every single museum's content into Europeana, and we have worked with them to add Creative Commons licenses and the CC0 and public domain options so that people know how they can use European museum content. And the Noun project is actually an interesting one. It's one of the first business model-y cases I will touch upon. There are a couple more later. The Noun project is an iconography project. It's a platform for designers who design icons to share their icons freely. Everything on the Noun project is under a CC0 or CC BY license, but the content is free, but the Noun project is still a business. And the way they make money is that with a lot of companies, they want to use icons in advertisements or in t-shirts or in places where they can't provide attribution. And so in order to not provide the attribution, Noun project charges a fee for companies to waive the attribution right. And that cut of the costs goes to both the Noun project as a platform and also the creators, the designers who participate in the platform. And in addition to that cut of costs, they have additional services around the icons. They have a subscription membership fee. They have a variety of things. I would definitely check them out. It's thenounproject.com. This is Creative Commons as applied to media and music. So, for example, YouTube has CC BY licensing enabled, and then Vimeo has all of the Creative Commons licenses enabled, and they're a video platform. With music, it's a little bit, as we know, music is a bit of a challenge these days because most people are streaming now through Spotify and iTunes. So we're actually looking for different ways to work with music platforms to make it more creative and more likable by artists to participate in these platforms. So for example, Bandcamp, it offers Creative Commons licensed albums, but they also allow their creators to sell their Creative Commons licensed albums. It's basically the model that Radiohead started years ago when they said, here, you can have our music for free, pay us what you want. And they still got money, but they got money directly from their fans instead of through a recording contract. So they got maybe less money in general, but they got more of the cut from direct music from their fans. Jamendo is another one. We started with them years ago. They now offer commercial licensing options for creators in addition to CC licensing. And because Creative Commons licensing is non-exclusive, it means that you can enter into commercial contracts with companies even if you release some of your music under Creative Commons. This is an example of journalism and media outfits moving towards Creative Commons. So we know that journalism and media is it's sort of a touchy space right now. They've had a lot of problems with sustainability in the United States since our last presidential election. That actually hasn't been the case. We've gotten much more subscribers to the New York Times, for example, and lots of media outlets. But it's still a struggle, it's still a challenge. So we've been working with the various media outlets to experiment and see whether CC licensing can increase distribution while increasing viewership and getting more subscriptions and eyeballs to that website. Medium, which is the green logo up on the upper left, is actually a fairly new publishing platform that was founded by a Twitter co-founder. Medium, we worked with them closely over the last couple of years to integrate Creative Commons licensing options for its users, and they actually probably have the best design or user interface for CC licensing of any platform that I've worked with, so I would definitely check them out for the design. And then this is Creative Commons in the scientific data academic research space. In this space, it's pretty much a no-brainer. As I said, we're moving towards open access. 50% of articles online are under a CC license or otherwise freely available online. Creative Commons attribution, which is the most open license, is actually the gold standard in the US and elsewhere for sharing research articles online. Public Library of Science on the upper right is one we launched with years ago. Everything there is under a Creative Commons attribution license. Basically, it's becoming more and more evident to the academic research community that you shouldn't pay for the research you read because research and scientific innovation should be really available to everybody. And so this next one is Creative Commons in the open education world. So there's a huge movement towards open educational resources around the globe. And this is much evident with Wikipedia, but it's also evident with MIT OpenCourseWare and other courseware that you've probably accessed. Everything on MIT OpenCourseWare is under Creative Commons. All the lectures, all the syllabi, everything you access to that website is under CC, and people are using MIT OpenCourseWare in dozens of countries around the world. And lots of institutions since MIT launched this in 2002 have followed suit. MIT was actually one of our founding partners of Creative Commons. So this is, as I mentioned earlier, with international space programs, SpaceX had started to issue images from space under CC0. Many other intergovernmental organizations and government organizations are moving towards openness as well. The World Bank worked with us and they have adopted Creative Commons for many of their research outputs. UNESCO is another one that has adopted Creative Commons. In the United States, the biggest probably grant program ever in the world that is under Creative Commons is the United States Department of Labor's $2 billion community college training program. I think it launched roughly 5 years ago. I was part of that project and leading it. And essentially, we work with community colleges across the United States to develop $2 billion worth of open educational resources in industry sectors, such as aeronautics, aerospace, medicine, manufacturing, electrical engineering. And all of those resources are now available under Creative Commons attribution at a website called skillscommons.org. And that is possible because the Creative Commons license is on them. And we worked very closely with the federal government in the US to make that happen. And the logic for that was because taxpayer dollars, those $2 billion came from the public, and so those resources should be free for the public. Another movement towards openness is foundations. So we've been working with foundations like the Hewlett Foundation, the Gates Foundation, Ford Foundation, Wikimedia Foundation. In the past 10 years, we've seen this movement towards foundations also requiring open licenses on their grantee outputs. So they're saying, hey, if you take our money, we want to maximize our investment. We don't want that content to be copyrighted and go into a black hole and never be used again. We want that content to be available for our future grantees and also for the public because we're a foundation. Our mission statement is to have an impact on the public. So all of these foundations listed here have a Creative Commons licensing requirement for their grant outputs. So I'm going to pause again for a question and answer. There may not be any, but I know it's a lot of information and I kind of want to take a break from talking as well. So any questions at this point? I can still go on if there are no questions too.
ต้องถามผ่านไมค์ค่ะเพื่อที่นักแปลภาษานะคะจะได้แปลให้ได้นะคะค่ะเนื่องจากเรื่อง Creative Commons นะคะยังเป็นเรื่องที่ใหม่สำหรับคนในประชาชนคนไทยนะคะทั้งในแง่ของธุรกิจภาคธุรกิจเองภาคสถาบันการศึกษาที่ถ้าสมมติอยากจะนำ Creative Commons ไปใช้กับคอนเทนต์ของตัวเองนะคะหรือว่าประชาชนทั่วไปก็ตามค่ะดังนั้นค่ะถ้าสมมติว่าอย่างที่ทางคุณเจนได้แนะนำไว้นะคะว่ามันมีรูปแบบของ License ทั้งหมด6ประเภท6รูปแบบการเลือกนะคะถ้าสมมติว่าตอนแรกเนี่ยค่ะเราอาจจะยังไม่มีความเข้าใจเพียงพอเราเลือกรูปแบบของการ license ที่เป็นแบบหนึ่งแต่ว่าพอตอนสุดท้ายเรามาพบว่าเราเลือกผิดประเภทมันมีวิธีแก้ปัญหาตรงนี้ได้ไหมคะค่ะเดี๋ยวคุณ Mrs. Jens will answer the question
So that's a great question. Sorry, I didn't go over that in the basics. Essentially, with Creative Commons licenses, you can always change the license. If you are the copyright owner, you can always change the license at any time. And from that point forward, the new license will apply to that work. Now, it won't apply if someone accessed your work before then under the old license. They can continue to use the work under the old license because we don't want a case where someone puts a license, takes it away, and then someone gets sued for using the work under the license. But as a copyright owner, you can always change the license so that from this day forward, for example, anyone accessing my work will access it under the new license. So for example, a lot of projects will choose a more restrictive license because they just want to get their feet wet. They want to do a pilot and they don't want to dive feet first. And so they will choose maybe the non-commercial license. They have a good experience with it and they decide to go more open later on and there's no harm done to the project or to the users. Any more questions at this point?
ผมมีคำถามนิดนึงนะครับคือจากที่ยกตัวอย่างคุณเจนยกตัวอย่างนะครับคือ เป็นกรณีของ NASA กับกรณีของมูลนิธิของบิลเกตส์นะครับผมอยากทราบว่าเวลาเป็นหน่วยงานรัฐกับส่วนของพวก Foundation ของบิลเกตส์เนี่ยเขาเลือกที่จะใช้เป็นไลเซนส์แบบไหนและเหตุผลเพราะว่าอะไรครับแล้วก็อีกอย่างหนึ่งคืออย่างกรณีของพวก Foundation ต่างๆเนี่ยมีเก็บ royalty fee บางส่วนไหมอยากรู้ว่าในทางบัตรเนี่ยเป็นลักษณะแบบไหนแล้วก็มีข้อดีข้อเสียไงจากประสบการณ์ที่ทางคุณเจนได้เรียนรู้เรื่องนี้มาครับ
Sure, I think I got that. So with the foundations, actually all the foundations we work with choose the more open licenses because their reasoning is that, we're investing this money to impact the public and our purpose as a foundation is to do good in the community. So we want anything that our money goes towards to be completely open. But we do want credit to the grantees and to ourselves so that we know where the information or resources came from. So I would say all of those on the slide, definitely the Gates Foundation, definitely the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation have chosen Creative Commons Attribution, which is basically saying you can do anything with these works. Even for commercial purposes, you can remix them, but you have to give us credit so we know where they came from and we can trace them back to their origin. I feel like maybe Vancouver might have a share-alike term attached, but I would have to check on that. With NASA, NASA's an interesting one. NASA, not all of it has gone Creative Commons. I think they've done certain photojournalism projects where they'll put it out under Creative Commons, and I think they may have chosen CC BY, which they actually got criticism for because in the United States, any government-created work is in the public domain automatically. But it's only public domain for United States citizens, which is why we work with the government to adopt CC licensing so that anyone in another country can also use United States government works without fear of, being sued or contacted.
ครับอยากจะสอบถามกรณีเกี่ยวกับ MIT Course นะครับจะสอบถามว่าโครงการนี้ของ MIT นะครับคอร์สตัวนี้ครับตัว Open Source เราสามารถนำมาใช้ในส่วนของการพาณิชย์ได้ไหมนอกจากการศึกษานี่คือคำถามข้อแรกนะครับคำถามข้อที่2ครับสถาบันการศึกษาในประเทศไทยถ้าต้องการจะไปร่วมกับ MIT Course ตรงนี้ครับสามารถร่วมได้ในช่องทางไหนบ้างและสถาบันการศึกษาจำเป็นจะต้องเป็นมหาวิทยาลัยหรือว่าโรงเรียนก็สามารถเข้าร่วมได้ครับมี2คำถาม
Yeah, so let me answer your second question and then try to remember your first one. So your second question is there's an actual open courseware consortium made up of 100, probably 200 institutions around the world that have joined on the open courseware movement that are putting out their materials under a Creative Commons non-commercial or more open license. And so I would definitely go to that website. You can just Google Open Courseware Consortium and that's where you can get started with information. And there's contact information there if you want a Thai institution to join that courseware initiative. In terms of your first question of how you can use MIT OpenCourseware, so I'm not sure if I understood it, but it is under a non-commercial share-alike license. So you'd have to abide by those conditions. You wouldn't be able to use it for commercial purposes. You would only be able to use it for non-commercial purposes, including educational. If you wanted to use it for commercial purposes, there's nothing stopping you, though, from reaching out to MIT and saying, hey, is this use okay? That's one thing that people don't really get about Creative Commons licenses. It's not the be-all, end-all. It's really the start of a conversation that you can have with the creator, because the creator has signaled, I want to share this openly under these conditions, but come talk to me if you want to make more uses of it. Okay, so why don't I continue with the next section, and then we will pause for even more questions at the end where we'll have lots more time, because I want to get to, now these questions are getting at sort of case studies, and that's basically what I'm going to be covering in the next section. Okay, so this is now where it gets interesting. So I mentioned that we started off as a set of copyright licenses and that we've been used in all these kinds of platforms, and essentially for maybe the first 13 to 15 years of our organizational lifespan, that's what we focused our efforts on making sure the legal infrastructure was robust and on making sure Creative Commons was adopted in companies and institutions and in governments around the world. But what we didn't expect is what I'm going to go over now, is how Creative Commons, since 2001, without any of our control or our shaping it really, other than giving these kinds of talks, started emerging in different areas around the world in very interesting ways. And Creative Commons started being used as part of this sharing culture, as part of this open culture that we didn't even imagine at the time. So it's basically Creative Commons in the wild, what's happened. So I'll go over some of those now. So what I said at the beginning, Creative Commons signals a set of values and a different way of operating, and this is what these following case studies will represent. So this is a graphic from our latest Creative Commons State of the Commons report, where the 1.2 billion number came from. We also featured examples of stories from around the world in more than 12 regions. And this report was actually translated into 13 languages, including many languages you've never heard of, like Yoruba, which was it was a learning experience for me. And I mentioned this book before. I will also be talking about a couple case studies from this book. So both of these publications are available for free online under Creative Commons, and we hope to have either of them be translated into Thai if it is relevant to you. So I mentioned that Creative Commons is a global movement towards openness. Essentially, Creative Commons values and beliefs have started influencing the way the world is working. And these are the examples I'm going to be going over. Creative Commons has impacted cultural heritage, what we call the GLAM sector. GLAM is an acronym for galleries, libraries, art, archives, and museums. It's also affected current day arts and culture, so current like memes on the internet that you see. CC has a role in there, and current day music. Education and research, I mentioned before. Government and policy. 3D printing, I mentioned before, it's an emerging field. New technologies that we didn't even imagine are now being influenced by Creative Commons because they are under copyright, and anything that can be copyrighted can also be Creative Commons licensed. And then I'm going to give you a couple examples of some experimental business models of creators and companies that are using Creative Commons as a leveraging point to gain greater distribution while, maintaining some kind of profit. So the first example is the New York's Metropolitan Museum of Art. So for those of you who have not been to New York or are not familiar with the Met Museum, it is one of New York's oldest institutions. They are at the forerunner of the museum space in the New York art scene. And we've been working with them for a very long time. I first had coffee with a technician there in New York 8 years ago, and it took 8 years worth of conversations to get them to adopt Creative Commons, but it finally paid off, because earlier this year we did this big splash announcement where the Met Museum essentially put out 375,000 images of public domain artworks online under CC0. Basically signaling to the world, saying we don't have any rights in these works because they're in the public domain. Please do what you want with them. And in concert with that, we launched a lot of remix initiatives. And since then, the Met Museum, that particular open access initiative has gotten a lot more traffic online. It's gotten a lot more participation. People have started visiting the museum. They've seen a lot of good things. We have a lot of research and articles and news articles coverage of that, which I'm happy to share with you following the session. So that was a great thing. But Met Museum is really only one player in the museum space. And last we counted, this is also from the State of the Commons report that we issued earlier this year, there are 92.9 million works that are marked as in the public domain using one of our public domain tools. Of course, there's many more public domain works than that, but this is what we can count because people have used our tools to mark them as public domain. So the movement with cultural heritage institutions is growing, which is why I want to go over one of the most interesting examples in the museum world that also has to do with a business model that is a little bit new and unique. So how many of you have heard of the Rijksmuseum in the Netherlands? No one. And that's the point, because they're a very small museum. No one has heard of them. No one really heard of them before Creative Commons either. Their interesting story is that they were a small museum in the Netherlands, but they hosted great European works of art, like Van Gogh and others from the Renaissance era. And they had high quality digital images of these public domain artworks. Essentially, back in like 2009, they were going to have to close a physical part of their museum, and they were worried that they would lose patronage and participation because their museum would be closed. So they decided to come up with a digital strategy. They said, let's up our digital platform, our digital presence online, and see if we can maintain readership that way and maintain viewership and maybe get our presence known in the world. And it just kind of started off as a small experiment. And they decided to work with Creative Commons to issue an initial batch of images of their artworks online under a Creative Commons BY license. This is actually later on because they moved more open after they had a good experience with BY. But this is an example of a Van Gogh artwork, high quality, that they put online on their platform under CC0. So the interesting thing with the Rijksmuseum was they started off with CC BY, but as they decided to move more open and they chose CC0 for the public domain artworks, they found that their viewership increased. People became to write more about the museum in news and industry, and they actually had greater sales of museum merchandise and even digital photography sales online, because they would offer maybe one resolution image under Creative Commons, but they would charge for higher print reproductions. And so this is kind of the evolution of sales over the years. As they went more open, they also made more money. And it's not necessarily causation, because there'd have to be more studies to do that. But the fact that as they went more open, they made more money, it means Creative Commons is not at odds with business. It can totally be integrated into your business model in a way that is fruitful for both the public and your mission as a museum to be a public service, but also you can still recoup costs. So when they were interviewed, Rijksmuseum, there's many, many case studies written about the Rijksmuseum by the Open GLAM institutions and Wikimedia GLAM institutions. When they were interviewed, asked, would you do this again? They said, of course, absolutely, because we create goodwill with the public. People know us now. We were a small museum, and now we're in these case studies all around the world, and Creative Commons is promoting us as well. And the only thing they said they would change is that we would do it a lot faster, because it took 3 years to kind of do it. So now I'm going to move into an example in government. I mentioned the United States Department of Labor, but this is actually a much more concrete example, and it's near you, New Zealand. So New Zealand actually has a website dedicated to geographical data and earthquake data. And they decided to build this website back, they have a lot of earthquakes, their emergency response time isn't as fast. They thought, hey, we have all this data, why don't we just share it with the public, see what comes of it. And so they built this website basically because they felt, a public responsibility, but they didn't realize all the things that would happen with it. It's called GeoNet. They put all the data out under Creative Commons attribution. And essentially, since they put this out, they had citizens and organizations and other institutions playing with this data, building software applications, building ways to increase medical care during an emergency, being able to predict earthquakes a little bit better, even though, that science is still not quite there. And all these amazing things happened because they decided to make the data open and public. And I already mentioned this grant program, so I won't rehash it. Now I want to talk about how the old system of museums and cultural heritage that is thousands of years old is now colliding with a new system, such as 3D printing. 3D printing is an emerging field. It's a way to design objects and print them. It's basically democratized the way we manufacture in the United States and elsewhere. You can print everything from a prosthetic hand to a figurine to an army machine weaponry. Basically anything that is physical, you can 3D print, and the technology continues to evolve at a rapid pace. We never imagined that this field would incorporate Creative Commons when we founded Creative Commons. So this is an example of the old clashing with the new, or actually taking advantage of the new. The British Museum, one of the oldest institutions, decided to release their artworks. They're 3D, so they have a lot of old sculptures in the public domain in their museum, but no one can really see them because they're in Britain, and not everybody goes to Britain to see these artworks. So they worked with Sketchfab, a 3D printing platform, to release the designs under Creative Commons and to invite their patrons to remix these designs and interact with the artworks. And since they did that, they've gotten so much feedback online, so much feedback through the platform, but also many more people being curious about their old art collections that may not be on view in the museum at any given time because they have physical space issues. This is a little bit more up to date. So Thingiverse is probably the biggest platform for 3D printing in the world, unless there's an Asian one that I don't know about, but in the Western world, Thingiverse is the biggest one. 98% of their designs are under Creative Commons licenses. They enable CC licenses and the CC0 option for their users. So the 1.6 million objects that are designed on their website are contributed by their users. And there's a vibrant sharing community on that platform where they are just remixing things. And this is one example. So the original design was MacGyver's human skull with mandible and teeth. It was basically just a design for a human skull. And then it was remixed 6 different times by 6 different creators. And 6 remixes down the line, somebody had developed a candy dish that was made of the same human skull design. And so this is kind of just a fun example, but of course there are more useful applications when it comes to 3D printing. So these are now the examples from the Made with Creative Commons book that I mentioned, where it was an investigation into business models, and then it ended up being the fact that Creative Commons values are actually influencing these business models. So Amanda Palmer, many of you have probably heard of her. She is a musician. She's part of the Dresden Dolls. She is a huge proponent of Creative Commons and a huge proponent of her fans. The unique thing about her as an artist is that she likes to connect directly with her fans, and that probably is why she ended up going with Creative Commons and for a lot of her work. So she actually started off as a street performer in the streets, and when she was interviewed for this book, she mentioned how, I don't remember the people that walked by and never put money into my hat. But what I did remember is the few people who did stop to listen and drop money into the hat. And it was because of those fans that I kept coming back day after day to the subway to continue playing. And it's that kind of appreciation for her fans that really led her to become an alternative musician and to really leverage the internet and Creative Commons in ways that other musicians maybe have not. She decided to, she tried the conventional recording labels, but it didn't really fit her style. And so she and her band launched a Kickstarter project a few years ago where they asked for $100,000 for this musical project that they were doing. They ended up getting way more than they asked for. They got $1.2 million through Kickstarter, and it was probably one of the highest grossing Kickstarter projects of all time. And that's because her fans really trusted her to produce this project. Today, she's now experimenting with a new platform called Patreon. Patreon is a Silicon Valley-based company where it allows creators to get subscribers to their content. So it's really more about building up your reputation first as an artist, getting a fan base, and then saying, hey, do you want to support me on an ongoing basis, either by project or monthly? And so Amanda Palmer actually has about 11,000 subscribers, where she's making about $37,000 per project. And then there are other creators on the platform that do monthly subscription models. So Patreon is still experimenting. We just had an event with them in San Francisco. It's something you should definitely check out, something that artists can check out. So this is SparkFun. SparkFun is interesting. It's an electronics manufacturing company. It's kind of in the new space, just like 3D printing. They really are all about selling their products online, and they're interesting because they actually started off with they knew what kind of business they wanted to be. This is the founder. His name is Nathan Seidler. When he set out to start the business, he said, I don't want to become one of those companies that really make money off the IP. I don't want to just lock down everything and just not innovate. The goal for my business is that every 6 months, I want to be making a better product. I want to be constantly innovating. I want to be at the forefront in my industry. And because that was his business objective, he decided, what's going to incentivize us to make our products better every 6 months is if people copy our stuff. It'll make us try to make it better so that people keep coming back to us. And so he decided to put out all of his design and schematics for his products under Creative Commons. And then he also puts out educational tutorials and materials for students and just the wider public under Creative Commons as well. And since he started doing this, they've gained a loyal fan base. So the way he views it is that it's long-term gain versus short-term. In the short term, they may lose a few dollars, but in the long term, they're building up their brand, they're gaining a loyal fan base, and people come to them because they are reputable, because they know that they're going to innovate and make the product better in 6 months. And they've also added services around support around their products, where they have the best service for their products, and they have the best educational tools and resources for their products. So this is an example of an electronics company using Creative Commons. So now I'm going to go into Creative Commons opportunities in Thailand. This is the point where I would like to hear from you, but before I open it up for questions again, I actually want to give you an overview about how the global network is working and how Creative Commons Thailand is going to start and how you can join as an individual member or as part of your company or organization. So I mentioned before that when we first started Creative Commons, we launched with 85 chapters. Back then, it was a very different structure. Each country had a different MOU with us because it was very formal, because the whole point of the network was to port the licenses into different jurisdictions. So we needed legal experts in every country. Now that is not so much the case because we already have the licenses. We already know they're legally viable. They've been versioned to the latest version, which is an international version of the licenses. Now all we need is translation and adoption. So in the past 2 years, we've been having an existential crisis of sorts with the network, where we basically been funded by the Hewlett Foundation to figure out a new global network strategy and structure, and that's what we're doing right now. So it's actually very timely that I'm here to talk about starting up the Creative Commons chapter in Thailand, because we're actually in the middle of a very innovative stage of our global network. The new global network is going to look something like this. Essentially, there's going to be country teams. There's going to be no official MOU between us and the country, but there's going to be one chapter for the most part per country, and we're going to sign on to sort of a global network philosophy. There's going to be platforms, which is platform areas of work that the different country teams will collaborate on. So for example, if Thailand decides that education and research is a focal point for you going forward, then you would join the education platform to further open education in your region and in other regions. And then the third part is governance, and that's going to be, the network is going to be governed by a global council with representatives from every chapter. So I went over those things: Global Network Council, network platforms, which is working groups, and how to join the CC Thailand chapter, which will be at the end. So I don't know much about the Global Network Council at this point. The first meeting will be at the next Global Summit in April in 2018. So by that point, I'm sure CC Thailand will have a representative to send to that meeting, and we look forward to seeing one or more of you there. Essentially, the Global Network Council is going to be loosely based on the United Nations model. There won't be any formal legal structure, but there will be some oversight, and it will be flexible. And it will have representatives from every chapter in the world so that we're not favoring one region over the other. So yeah, that's pretty much all I know. I'm not the one leading this program, but if you have questions, there's the email there, network@creativecommons.org, that you can email. But know that with the local chapter, ETDA will be the host for the Creative Commons Thailand chapter, and you can always reach out to them for questions as well. I mentioned platforms or areas of work where different country teams will collaborate around the globe. We've already have 4 that we started. So you can join one that we started or start your own. But the 4 that are already started is copyright reform. So those who believe that copyright law is too restrictive in their country and around the world, you can get together and try to reform copyright and make it less restrictive. The second one is open education. That's basically open access to and universal access to educational resources, whether they are textbooks in primary schools or in higher education. And I can connect you with the Open Education Director at my organization who works on that platform. And then GLAM, I mentioned GLAM is the acronym for Galleries, Libraries, Archives, and Museums. That's cultural heritage, and it's all about working with institutions like the Met Museum and the British Museum to open up their artwork so that they are freely accessible to the public. And then last but not least is the Community Development Platform. That's mainly about growing the network and developing and starting new chapters in Thailand and elsewhere. So how can you join as an individual or as an organization? Right now, we're still working out the logistics, and ETDA, as the CC Thailand chapter host, will have more details for you. But you can join now in terms of getting more information. There is a Creative Commons Thailand mailing list that we started at CC. I won't put the URL here because you won't remember it, but you can get it from me afterwards. You can also email ETDA. There's a global Creative Commons Slack community. Slack is a platform for collaboration. There's probably about 800 people just chatting with each other in the Slack community. So if you want to join that and join a wing of it, you are more than welcome to. It's open to everyone. It's accessible on creativecommons.org. You can just find it there. And then we also have a global Creative Commons newsletter, which has many subscribers, and that's where we keep our community abreast of the news and all the different cool things that are going on, such as Creative Commons and 3D printing. So now I want to discuss and get questions from you about what you see as the opportunities for Creative Commons in Thailand and what sectors you work in, and if you have any questions about the presentation in general. And maybe if you see an opportunity to join one of the network platforms, or whether you want to engage, a local project here. And just as a reminder, here are the different sectors that I went over. So let me pause there for questions and discussion.
มีท่านใดมีคำถามไหมคะสามารถถามได้เป็นภาษาไทยนะคะแล้วก็ถ้าอยากจะฟังที่แปลนะคะก็สามารถใส่ตัวแปลภาษาได้ค่ะสามารถถามได้เลยนะคะ
สวัสดีค่ะจริงๆฟังมาแล้วเนี่ยเหมือนตัวอย่างที่ทางคุณเจนยกมาเนี่ย CC เหมือนจะเป็นเครื่องมือหนึ่ง Creative Commons เหมือนจะเป็นเครื่องมือหนึ่งที่ช่วยในการโปรโมทธุรกิจตัวโปรโมทงานเพลงโปรโมทศิลปินนะคะที่อยากจะทราบเลยก็คือว่าวิธีการค่ะเวลาคนเนี่ยเราอยากจะเปลี่ยนธุรกิจเราให้มันเป็นธุรกิจที่แชร์ลิงคอนเทนต์ต่างๆเนี่ยเราควรจะต้องเตรียมพร้อมอะไรบ้างควรจะมีกระบวนการภายในองค์กรอะไรบ้างที่จะต้องเตรียมเรื่องเหล่านี้
So I think it will really depend on your business and what your goals are and what industry you work in. But I mean, I think the first kind of a thing to ask yourself or approach is my business built around content? Is it built solely around content? Do I need the IP over my content in order to make money? If that's your answer, then probably Creative Commons is not for you. If your answer is, my business is really, the core of my business is really the services I provide, or the bundled kinds of content with the services, then Creative Commons could be the answer for you. Because in that case, you're really charging for the services, and the content itself, you want to be widely distributed to advertise your business. So it would really depend, but that's the general approach.
คือโดยคอนเซปต์ของตัว Creative Commons ก็ดีนะครับช่วยในแง่ของการแชร์ริ่งอะไรต่างๆคราวนี้ปัญหาที่ผมอยากทราบในทางปฏิบัติที่คุณเจนเจอมาเนี่ยคือเมื่อมีการใช้ไลเซนส์ของตัว Creative Commons เสร็จแล้วเนี่ยเท่ากับเราอนุญาตให้บุคคลต่างๆสามารถเข้ามาใช้ได้แต่มีการกำหนดประเภทว่าใช้ได้แค่ไหนกรณีที่เกิดมีการ infringement หรือการละเมิดขึ้นมากรณีอย่างเงี้ยสมมติว่าเป็นบุคคลธรรมดาเข้าไปเป็นพันธมิตรหรือกรณีที่หน่วยงานรัฐหรือเอกชนเข้าไปเป็นส่วนหนึ่งของเมมเบอร์เนี่ยเวลามีการละเมิดขึ้นมาเนี่ยในหน่วยงานหลักของ CC เนี่ยเราช่วยเหลือในด้านนี้ยังไงบ้างเป็นเรื่องที่เขาต้องไปดำเนินคดีเองหรือว่า Creative Commons มี Social Sanction หรือมีวิธีการไงบ้างครับอยากทราบปัญหาในทางบัตรเพราะว่าเท่าที่ผ่านมาส่วนใหญ่แล้ว Creative Commons มักจะถูกโจมตีเรื่องนี้ซึ่งผมคิดว่าน่าจะมีแนวทางที่เป็นไกด์ไลน์ให้กับทางประเทศไทยว่าในกรณีนี้จะแก้ไขยังไงครับ
Yeah, so that's a really great question. Maybe to give you some background, so Creative Commons in the last 16 years, the licenses have been contested and gone to court a handful of times. This is a good thing. When things go to court, it means, it might be not as legally robust. The fact that Creative Commons licenses have only been contested in court a handful of times, I can count probably 5 times, means that the licenses are legally robust and they're simple and easy to understand. And so most people resolve those disputes outside of the court system. In those few cases where they have gone to court, they've either found that the infringement had nothing to do with copyright, and so it had nothing to do with Creative Commons. For example, it was a moral rights issue or a publicity rights issue. In those couple cases where they found it did have to do with the licenses were upheld in the court of law. So, for example, there was a case in Germany where the attribution condition was violated. The abuser had to pay money because they didn't follow the condition of the license. In terms of what Creative Commons organization does in instances like this, it depends on what the court case is and where the court case is located. So for example, in Germany, we would work with our Creative Commons Germany affiliates because they know the law best and they are the experts. They might support that case by writing an amicus curiae brief, which is what we do in the United States. A very recent court case in the United States was Great Minds versus FedEx. It was a textbook publishing company versus FedEx, the printing company, and we filed amicus curiae briefs in support of the non-commercial condition. And then generally I said that disputes are, for the most part, resolved outside of the court system. That's a good thing, and it's because our community, when there is a misuse, rather than just, if you put your work online without any protection, without any Creative Commons license on it, nobody would know if someone misused it. That happens all the time in the internet. It's what people do. if you put something under Creative Commons online, because there's a community and a movement around this content, and someone abuses that content, someone in the community will alert you much quicker than if you just put that content out without a CC license. And so then you look at the abuse, and usually the dispute is resolved because the user who abused your content probably just didn't understand. They were well-intentioned. So all you have to do in those cases really is reach out via a tweet or an email and say, hey, you didn't give me attribution. And they'll be like, oh, I'm sorry. And they'll go ahead and provide the attribution because it was a mistake. And for most cases, that's what happens. In the few cases that it goes to court, the licenses have been upheld.
ครับอยากจะสอบถามคำถามข้อที่หนึ่งนะครับคุณเจนได้มาเข้ามาที่ประเทศไทยแล้วก็มีในส่วนของ CC Network เนี่ยตั้งแต่ปี 2018 นะครับอยากให้ยกตัวอย่างความสำเร็จของหน่วยงานภาครัฐหรือว่าเอกชนในประเทศไทยครับว่าที่ใช้หรือว่าประยุกต์ใช้ตัว Creative Commons แล้วประสบความสำเร็จขอตัวอย่างสักหนึ่งตัวอย่างกับกรณีที่2ครับคุณเจนมองว่าประเทศไทยกำลังจะเข้าสู่ Thailand 4.0 มีจุดไหนครับที่มองศักยภาพของคนไทยที่ได้สัมผัสมาตั้งแต่ปี 2018 แล้วก็ดูกฎหมายในเรื่องของดิจิตอลลอว์แล้วก็ดิจิตอลคอนเทนต์ครับมีสิ่งไหนครับที่คิดว่าคนไทยมีศักยภาพหรือช่วยยกตัวอย่างสตาร์ทอัพในประเทศต่างๆเช่นสิงคโปร์เกาหลีใต้ที่เขาใช้ในเรื่องของ Creative Commons ไปสร้างมูลค่าทางบิสเนสครับ2 คำถามครับขอบคุณครับ
Okay, I think I got maybe one of the questions about what do I see as opportunity for Creative Commons in Thailand in 2018. I'm not sure about your first question. I think you asked something about an example of an NGO using Creative Commons. But let me answer the second question first. So opportunities for Thailand, I definitely see opportunities for Thailand here. Just in my short conversations with ETDA yesterday, it seemed very relevant that with the younger generation in Thailand, people are sharing more than ever. And with the older media outlets, they're not resonating or reaching the newer audiences. So I feel like Creative Commons could be leveraged to reach the younger generation and really maximize distribution and involve the younger generation in actually co-creating content, which is what's happening. And that's not just unique to Thailand, that's happening in Korea, that's happening in Japan, that's happening in the United States. That's why we have 85 jurisdictions that we're working with, because it's a common thing that the internet has enabled in terms of access. In terms of your first question, maybe you can clarify what you were asking. Were you just asking for an example of another NGO that is like Creative Commons or another NGO that uses Creative Commons licensing?
มีใครมีคำถามเพิ่มเติมไหมคะค่ะ
Thank you for your presentation. I remember you mentioned that software is not yet included in the scope of Creative Commons license. Is that right?
Yes, so because software actually predates Creative Commons. Software open source software probably started in the 80s with Richard Stallman's movement towards open source software. So they actually have their own system of open source licenses for software, and they're doing just fine. So when we started Creative Commons, it was because there was no open source software equivalent for content that wasn't software, like creative works, like media and literature. And that's why Creative Commons we encourage only to apply to non-software content, because it was designed for non-software content.
Thank you.
Yeah.
ในส่วนของคอนเซปต์ของ Creative Commons ปัจจุบันเนี่ยได้มีการมองไปถึงเรื่องของตัวเทคโนโลยีใหม่พวก AI หรือว่าพวกเทคโนโลยีที่เป็นพวกโรบอทต่างๆด้วยหรือเปล่าครับไม่แน่ใจอย่างเช่นกรณีของ Google ที่มีพวก Google Car หรือว่าพวกจอยต่างๆอยากทราบข้อมูลเรื่องนี้เผื่อจะใช้เป็นข้อมูลเพิ่มเติมครับ
Yeah, so actually I wouldn't say we have any official program about Creative Commons and AI, but in the past there are a few examples where Creative Commons has been applied to car designs. So in open hardware, that's also an emerging space, just like with 3D printing, where people are using CC licenses in creative ways. So with Fiat, I think it was, I forget what year, they released an open source prototype car under Creative Commons. And I can dig that up for you. I actually have it in a slideshow talking about Creative Commons and design. But Creative Commons and design is basically a very new area. There's furniture under Creative Commons. When it comes to interacting with the physical and the digital space, it's a little more tricky when it comes to the law, but the CC license does adhere because copyright is in creative designs when they are digital, and they translate to the physical object. With artificial intelligence, that's we don't actually know of anything where CC is being applied in that space. I would imagine it's more technical and more software, and then in that case there'd be different licenses to apply to it. But I would love to explore further if you have any ideas in mind.
จะขอสอบถามเรื่องการลงนาม MOU เรื่อง Copyright License นะคะที่สอบถามก็คือว่าในกรณีประเทศไทยเนี่ยจะมีหน่วยงานหลักที่ลงนามกับ Creative Commons หรือไม่อันที่สองนะคะก็คือหรือแล้วแต่ว่า Creative Commons จะพิจารณาตามสมควรเช่นตามประเภทธุรกิจเอกชนหรือภาครัฐก็แล้วแต่ข้อ3ก็คือถ้าเป็นไปตามข้อ2ก็คือมีการลงนามกับหน่วยงานในแต่ละที่เนี่ยเงื่อนไขของ Creative Commons ตามที่ลงนาม MOU แต่ละที่นั้นจะเหมือนกันหรือเปล่าคะในประเทศไทยนะคะ
So I think I understand your question. So essentially, when I was talking about MOUs, I was saying we're no longer doing MOUs with agencies anywhere. The new global network structure is going to be much more flexible. So any agency in Thailand can become part of the global network, and you don't have to sign an MOU. In terms of being officially recognized as a Creative Commons Thailand chapter, ETDA will be that agency to be the host. But in terms of joining the global network, you can join no matter what agency you're representing or no matter if you're an individual. So I think that was your question. Was there something I missed?
Okay. ถามเยอะนิดนึงคือผมยังไม่ได้อ่านตัว term condition ของตัว license ของ Creative Commons คือปกติเขียนว่ารวมถึง copyright แล้วก็ related right คือสิทธิข้างเคียงด้วยคราวนี้เนี่ยผมไม่แน่ใจว่าตอนที่ relinquish คือสละสิทธิ์ทั้งหมดเนี่ยที่เป็น zero เนี่ยมันรวมถึงตัวธรรมสิทธิ์ moral right หรือว่าตัวพวกสิทธินักแสดงพวก performance right ด้วยหรือเปล่าเพราะว่าถ้ามันรวมด้วยเนี่ยก็อาจจะมีปัญหาที่หน่วยงานไทยอาจต้องแก้ข้อกฎหมายบางส่วนเนื่องจากว่าสิทธินักแสดงหรือว่าเรื่องต่างๆก็เลยอยากทราบว่าจริงๆในเรื่องนี้เนี่ยในทางกฎหมายเวลา relinquish เนี่ยรวมถึงสิทธิทั้งหมดหรือเปล่าหรือว่าเฉพาะว่าหรือว่าแล้วแต่ละประเทศที่จะไปตกลงกันแตกต่างจากตัวข้อตกลงหลักหรือ standard ของ Creative Commons ได้ครับ
So with the moral rights, it depends on the countries. So if you look at the specific CC0 text, it says, I relinquish all of my copyrights and neighboring rights as the law allows me to do in this jurisdiction. And so if your jurisdiction says you can't waive moral rights no matter what, then that would be upheld over CC0. CC0 was specifically designed so that it was only copyright and neighboring rights. But again, we can talk further because I am not a lawyer actually, but I work with two very smart lawyers, so we should get clear on that and how to align that. Yeah.
ค่ะเชิญเลยค่ะ
ค่ะอยากขอสอบถามนะคะตอนนี้เนื่องจากว่ามีทีวีหลายช่องของประเทศไทยแล้วก็สื่อหลายสื่อของประเทศไทยเนี่ยเพิ่มช่องทางการเผยแพร่คอนเทนต์เป็นใน YouTube แล้วเลยอยากจะขอสอบถามว่าอยากให้คุณเจนยกตัวอย่างของการใช้ YouTube ที่เอามาใช้กับ Creative Commons นะคะแล้วทำให้เคสนั้นเป็นเคสที่เหมือน success ของสำหรับเคสนั้นนะคะกับคำถามที่2ค่ะเมื่อกี้ติดใจตรงที่บอกว่าเกาหลีใต้เนี่ย ใช้เรื่อง Creative Commons ไปกับ Digital Content ด้วยคราวนี้เนี่ยเราเห็นว่า Digital Content ในเกาหลีใต้เนี่ยเป็นที่ประสบความสำเร็จมากธุรกิจเหล่านี้ค่ะมันจะสามารถมาแอพพลายในการใช้งานกับของประเทศไทยได้ยังไงมี2คำถามค่ะขอบคุณค่ะ
So I think I got the question. So with YouTube, I would say I can't really pinpoint any success story off the top of my head, but I would say that generally viewership goes up. So we actually feature a YouTube case study in the latest State of the Commons report. If you go to the report online, you'll see that. When we added the CC BY license to YouTube as an option for users, today there are 30 million videos on YouTube that are under CC BY. And up until next month, when they're going to revamp some of YouTube, you can actually go to the YouTube editor and search through those videos and remix them and even download them and align them to music. But I think that's going to change next month. So YouTube is actually not a good example to talk about at this point. There's going to be a lot of changes, like there is a lot of changes in Silicon Valley. But the latest State of the Commons report will point you to a case study about YouTube. When it comes to South Korea, so even though I am of Korean heritage, I am American, so I actually don't know that much about Korea. Creative Commons Korea, though, does have a very, very big volunteer team, and we had hosted our the global summit before this year in Seoul. And so I can definitely connect you to the Creative Commons Korea team because they actually have a lot of success stories when it comes to CC application in business and elsewhere. And yes, anything the CC licensed, whether it's in Korea or America or Finland, if it's under a CC license, you can use it in Thailand because it's global. It doesn't matter where in the world it is licensed.
มีท่านใดมีคำถามเพิ่มเติมไหมคะ
Okay, so there's no more questions. I wanted to end it on this slide. So this video, this is a GIF taken from a video we took at the Creative Commons Global Summit in Toronto earlier this year of all of our affiliates. So I just want to say thank you and also tell you that this SlideShare itself is going to be online. It's actually already online on SlideShare, which is another content publishing platform that shares PowerPoint presentations under Creative Commons, and I've put it online. You can download it, and you can remix it, and you can give this presentation yourself to your respective organizations. It's under the most open license. All you have to do is attribute Creative Commons. I want to say thank you, Kakunka, for having me here, and I'll be available for questions afterwards.
Thank you, Mrs. Chen Park, Director of Platform and Partnership Creative Commons.org ก็ตอนนี้นะคะก็ขอบคุณนะคะสำหรับ Mrs. Chen Park นั่นเองนะคะที่มาให้ความรู้กับเราในวันนี้ค่ะสำหรับทุกท่านเป็นยังไงกันบ้างคะสำหรับหัวข้อในวันนี้หวังว่าทุกท่านจะได้รับความรู้กันไปแบบเต็มๆเลยนะคะแล้วก็เป็นเครื่องมือและทางเลือกเพื่อแบ่งปันงานโดยเจ้าของลิขสิทธิ์นะคะในยุคที่ Digital Content นั้นสำคัญมากๆเลยค่ะแล้วก็เป็นและ True ที่มีค่าเรียกได้ว่าโอ้โหวันนี้ได้รับความรู้กันอย่างจุใจเลยนะคะและในลำดับถัดไปนี้นะคะก็ขอให้ทุกท่านค่ะสามารถพักผ่อน